Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a wheel bracket in SolidWorks. This is a part from my chair project that I've been working on for the past semester. This piece holds the wheel to the chair leg and sandwiches a ball bearing in place. To begin, we will create a new part file and save it immediately. Save early, save often. Usually, you'd create a part by an additive process, where you would add to the piece as you go. But today, I will be using a subtractive modeling process instead. This is because the wheel bracket is a fairly complex part, and it will be easier to shape it via several cuts than it would be to create several extrusions off of our previous geometry. So to begin, I'm going to create the side profile of the bracket. I'm going to create a sketch on the right plane, and first of all, before I do that, I am going to make sure that we are using the right unit system. I measured the wheel bracket in millimeters, so I'm going to switch to millimeter grams second. Now, creating a 2D sketch on the right plane, I'm going to start by drawing the hole where the axle for the wheel passes through this bracket. So I'm going to draw that and immediately dimension it to be 6.5 millimeters. This will make sure that everything else we draw is to scale. Now I'm going to draw a second circle, and this will be the very bottom of the wheel bracket. I measured this to have a diameter of 16 millimeters. From here, I'm going to freeform the rest of the wheel bracket and then dimension it later once we have the general shape down. So it's shaped vaguely like this. There we go. And because we've already dimensioned the bottom two circles here, I'm going to work from the bottom up on this part and make sure everything is dimensioned along the way. So I'm going to start by making the line and the circle tangent to each other on both sides, just like so. And I'm going to get rid of that excess line using the Trim Entities tool, Power Trim. So just drag across there. Cool. Now I'm going to use the Smart Dimension tool again to create the vertical height between the axle hole and the top of this first angled line, and I measured that to be 27 degrees on the back side and 30 degrees on the front. There we go. Also, I'm going to set the angle of these lines by first creating a center line on the axle hole that is horizontal, and then using the Smart Dimension tool to set an angle of, on the back, 60 degrees, and on the front I measured this to be 130 degrees. Alright, now we're going to work our way up. We can see that all the stuff we just mentioned is black, which means it's not going to be able to move anywhere. I measured this height, not this angle, this height to be 3 millimeters. And this distance I measured as 5 millimeters. This angle here is 65 degrees, and the height of this top part of the bracket is 11.2 millimeters. We can see that everything on the bracket now is black, which means I couldn't, if I wanted to, drag this around. It's not going anywhere. It's fully dimensioned. So now just a final touch to clean up this sketch. I'm going to go back to the Power Trim tool, and I'm going to trim that circle down to size. So now it's just an arc, and this is one solid piece with a hole in it. I'm going to finish this 2D sketch and then go to Features and create an extruded base that will go a distance of 32 millimeters because that is the width of the wheel bracket. I'm also going to switch the direction of the extrusion so that the right side plane is still the right side of the part when you're looking at it from the front. Alright, now we have our first extrusion done. I'm going to save early, save often before our part breaks. Then I'm going to move on to the next step. Here we're going to create the main hole that the wheel sits in, the wheel well for this bracket. I'm going to create a sketch on the flat surface on the front of the bracket. And to make it easier to draw, I'm going to make myself normal to that sketch. Now this is shaped as a kind of archway. So I'm going to create the arch by drawing a circle and immediately dimensioning that to a diameter of 27 millimeters. Next, I'm going to find the midpoint of this line here and the center of this circle. And because the circle is centered, I'm going to make those two vertical. And then I'm going to make the circle tangent to this horizontal line here. And that will set the height of our cut. Now, I'm going to make a corner rectangle to create the rest of this cut. I'm going to start at the side of the circle here and just kind of go to the bottom of the part. Now I'm going to use the Smart Dimension tool to make sure that this rectangle is 27 millimeters wide, just like our circle was. And to clean up this sketch, I'm going to use the Trim Entities Power Trim tool again to just kind of slice through the inner sketch lines there. And now we have one solid part sketch here that we can use to cut. So I'm going to exit the sketch, go to Features, and Extruded Cut this time. And I want this to go through all. And that'll make sure it moves all material front to back. I'm going to accept that. And there we go. It's looking much more like a wheel bracket now and not just a chunk of whatever. So, next step, we're going to round some of the faces on the wheel bracket here. And to that, we're going to use the Fillet tool. That's up here. These fillets are going to have a radius of 5.75 millimeters. And they are going to include this top front edge, this back corner here, and its opposite. Now, you'll note that I have turned on full preview. If your computer can handle that, that is really helpful for making sure that the fillets are doing what you want them to do before accepting them. And that way, you'll make sure it looks correct beforehand. Alright, that was really simple. Now for the next step, I'm going to hollow out the inside of the wheel bracket here. And that would be really difficult to do by hand. So, what I'm going to do is use the Shell tool. You see it up here. I'm going to select the surface that I want to shell. And what this is going to do is it's going to hollow out everything except the last bit of thickness that I tell it to do. So right now I want it to do everything except the last 2.5 millimeters of material here. So when I say show preview, you'll see it's going to hollow out that whole inside surface. So I'm going to accept this. You see, nice and hollow. Now the reason I did the fillets before doing the shell here is so that the inside would still be rounded. If I had waited to do the fillets until after I had done this shell, then those would have created sharp corners, and when I went to do the fillets later, it would have just cut through and created like holes in the bracket. Alright, So now that we've got that shell done, the next step is going to be finishing up some filleting on the top that was less relevant to the shell. So I'm going to fillet again, and these are again going to be 5.75 millimeters. And we're going to go all the way around. SolidWorks is nice and just did it when I clicked once. Sometimes it's not so kind. So we want to do this whole top face here, all those top edges. So accept that, and there you can see it's looking a lot more like the wheel bracket you saw at the beginning of the video. The next step will be to create the hole in the top of the bracket, and this is where the bolt that holds the ball bearings in place and the bracket to the rest of the chair goes. So I'm going to create a 2D sketch on the top surface of this part here. I'm going to go normal to that and just kind of drop a circle somewhere in there. I'm going to use the Smart Dimension tool to first set the diameter of this circle to 6.35 millimeters. Then I'm going to set the location by selecting the sides of the bracket. I know that it's 32 millimeters wide, so half of that is 16 to get this centered. And same goes for, hang on. Gotta select Smart Dimension tool again apparently. There we go. Here, halfway is 15 millimeters. And you can see that's nice and centered now. So we're going to exit this sketch. That was a fairly simple one. And we're going to go to Features, Extruded Cut, and we're going to again go through all with that to make sure we remove all material. There we go. Nice hole. The next step is going to be clearing out more of the wheel well. So currently we have an arch on the front and an arch on the back, but on the actual wheel bracket there's only an arch on the front. So to make this a nice square cut, I'm going to create a sketch on the vertical surface here and make myself normal to that. And I'm going to just create a rectangle that goes from the very bottom of this arch here to this line up here. There we go. And I'm going to make sure that this line and this line are collinear. I will try to make them collinear, but apparently SolidWorks doesn't like that. So what we're going to do is escape out of that, and we're going to delete this constraint, and now we can make these lines collinear. And just to make sure that the height is correct on this, we can throw a dimension down, 13.5, or I could have done another collinear with this line and the line behind it. So I'm going to leave that. And this is going to be an interesting cut because it's going to go in two directions. So I'm going to select Extruded Cut like I did before. Now cutting into the part, it doesn't need to go too far. I'm just going to say like 15 millimeters. Actually, that's still a bit, just like 10. There we go. That'll cut through everything it needs to cut through. Now I'm going to select direction 2, and on this one we can go through all. And there you can see you create a nice square cut on the back and still left that front arch intact. Next, on the final step, we are going to round the inside of this shell that we did earlier. And to that, we're going to use the fillet tool yet again. This is going to have a fillet radius of 1 millimeter this time. And we're going to click on pretty much everything inside of here. because the wheel bracket that I was measuring was fairly rounded on the inside. You can see SolidWorks was pretty kind again. And we also need to fillet this here. Same on the other side. And don't want to lose my sense of orientation. Okay. Also, this is going to be a bit more difficult, but if I can see through the hole, yeah. There we go. That line. Yes. Okay. That should be all of the fillets that we need on the inside. And this is our wheel bracket. Go back to isometric view. And to finish up, we're going to set a material. I believe this was made out of something like plain carbon steel. And there you go. That is how to make the wheel bracket for my Steelcase chair in SolidWorks.